The Duterte government promises more aggressive public spending and an improved tax system to help spur faster and more equitable economic growth. The government says underspending, which has plagued the Aquino administration, will not be a problem, at least in the next 6 years. So what's the game plan for this government? How can this administration spread the prosperity to areas outside of Metro Manila? How can it ensure the spending spree remains also corrupt-free? Hello, I'm Karen Davilla. You're watching ANC Presents 2020 The View Ahead in partnership with Colliers International, the leading commercial real estate services provider.
The Philippines is Asia's fastest growing economy with investment grade rating, benefiting from a so-called demographic dividend, rich natural resources, and a strategic location. So what's keeping investors away? As of 2014, the Philippines continued to be a laggard in terms of foreign direct investments in the region. While the country's ranking in the World Bank's Ease of Doing Business Index has significantly improved over the last 5 years, overtaking 45 countries, the climb to the top third of the pack has been challenging. In 2015, for example, to open a business, prospective entrepreneurs must accomplish 16 different steps, compared to Singapore, ranked number 1, where entrepreneurs need only to accomplish 3. President Rodrigo Duterte has vowed to streamline business registration processes.
Processing time in issuing permits and licenses shall be reduced to the barest minimum. In my city, it is always 3 days for local governments. That will bind the office of the president down to the last barangay level. 3 days. 3 days.
But this early, some groups have already expressed concerns about how the proposed shift to federalism could make things harder for businesses.
Technically, it becomes complicated for businessmen because each state now will have their own rules. Investors from abroad will have a problem with that.
Meanwhile, the government has outlined a plan that aims to make the country an attractive investment destination, including easing foreign ownership restrictions from 40% to 70%, appointing an anti-red tape czar, and simplifying the tax system. Back in April, Duterte, then just a candidate, made a case before business groups to convince them he is good for business. Many are holding him to his word, citing his solid track record in Davao, where he was mayor for over 20 years, for the confidence they place on the 71-year-old chief executive.
And joining our discussion, we have Budget Secretary Benjamin Diokno, Finance Undersecretary Teehankee, and from our forum partner, Colliers International, Richard Raimundo. Hello to all of you. I'll start with Secretary Diokno. Let's talk about the investment climate. President Duterte tried to sell that he was good for business. Barely 100 days into office, the peso is at, I think, a 7-year low at 48.25. The market is down. Talks about, investors leaving the country. What is happening?
Well, I keep talking to the foreign investors. These are long-term investors, not the hot money type, right? That if they are really for sound investment, this is the time to come in. Don't get distracted by the noise. Don't look at the trees, see the forest, okay? We started working 2 weeks before Duterte took power, remember? In Davao. There's a Davao forum. We unveiled the 10-point agenda, and our 2017 budget reflects that agenda. Okay, focus on public infrastructure, focus on the growing young population. We need to educate our young. Okay, we are spending 40% of our budget for social services so that we develop our young people into competent, healthy and agile workforce.
But before we go to details on the budget, can you give an understanding or an explanation to why we're experiencing this? I mean, during the Aquino administration of 6 years, although it was criticized for underspending, we had good credit ratings from it, I think 2 to 3 credit ratings agencies. The peso was good. The market was at an all-time high. It went bullish for a few years. What are we experiencing? I mean, is President Duterte to blame? His
Well,
statements, are they a factor?
It depends on how you define good. I mean, to me, the present level of the peso is not even competitive. It could be 49, could be 48.50, could be even 50. Okay, so what is important is not the depreciation of the peso, but whether it is competitive or not. Now, the weakening of the peso, just like the weakening of other currencies, is because that dollar is strengthening. And
So
that
it has nothing to do
nothing
with President Duterte.
Nothing to do with
Okay.
President Duterte.
It's about the U.S. economy.
It's the U.S. economy. There's an impending increase by the Fed of interest rates before the end of the year. And that's also related to what's happening in the stock market. The hot money, they're cashing in and they're trying to get out. Okay, all right. Of course, you can also probably add to that the speculation of our OFWs. Okay, knowing that the peso is weakening, they're holding back sending their money. So those are the factors. These are nothing to do with President Duterte.
As Finance Undersecretary, how would you sell the Philippines to foreign investors that are looking to, frankly, Vietnam, that has had $12 billion, I mean, last year alone. The Philippines has had $6 billion, just half of what Vietnam got. Myanmar, that is booming today, restrictions easing up for foreign business to come in. How would you sell the Philippines? What makes us better?
The Philippines right now is actually undergoing a change. What we're having is, this regime is trying to put in more rules in place, and that will make it really easier to do business for foreign investors. So we're working on a tax reform program, and one of the things that are the highlights of the tax reform program is adjusting the income tax rates to make them more competitive with the ASEAN countries.
Okay, that's one. Coming from the private sector, I wanted to ask you, is this good enough for you? Are you convinced? Would income tax reform make the difference for business?
I think, as Secretary Diokno has said, you look at the fundamentals. It's very strong, and you look at it on a long-term basis. If you look at the different sectors, we're seeing a lot of hotel brands coming in. That's a positive. For the longest time, we had very low brand penetration in the Philippines, and in the last 5 years, you're now seeing a lot of the brands coming in because they're looking at spending on infrastructure, 5-6%. For infrastructure on airports, roads. That's going to have a good effect on all of the sectors on real estate. So it's not just on the income tax. We look at all of the different aspects, from infrastructure, the ease of doing business.
Okay.
You've mentioned that. Shortening that, all of that will help in the long term for real estate.
Recently, in the World Economic Forum Global Competitive Index, we dropped a few points. And one of the challenges, even in the Aquino administration, is in the ease of doing business. We're not anywhere close to Singapore or, frankly, even Malaysia. That's really gone up the ladder. Where are we when it comes to that, Secretary?
Let me make clear, the decline was due to the Aquino government, not the Duterte government, right? And as you heard the president, he's very concerned about ease of doing business. He's putting a timeline, 3 days, right? In fact, he's putting a hotline,
Yeah.
888,
Okay.
right? So you can complain,
Yeah.
you can send your complaint, and he wants immediate feedback, okay? So we're doing everything.
Okay, that's one. To put up a power plant, if I remember correctly, my memory serves me right, we need, I think, 156 signatures.
Like 164.
164 signatures to actually start building the power plant. Meaning this company has won the bidding, they have the contract, they need 164 to actually start building. When it comes to that, for example, is there a goal? Are you advising the president?
Each department has a marching orders. You have to cut red tape. Okay?
Cut
so,
red tape.
So in the case of maybe Kusi, who is the Department of Energy Secretary, that 164 should be cut by at least half.
Come 2017, I mean, you are budgeting the most so far in terms of GDP to infrastructure.
We're
Next year.
hitting this year, next year we're hitting 5.4 and increasing, so that for the next 6 years we'll probably spend something like 8.2 trillion pesos. 8.2 trillion. Cumulative.
How sure are you that the market can actually absorb it? One of the biggest complaints of or excuses of the Aquino administration then was the absorptive capacity.
Okay, let me answer that.
Yeah,
Number
you have
one.
the budget that
Okay.
they say there are no contractors,
All right.
there are no carpenters, they
All right.
can't do it.
Number one, we'll do the projects on a 24-hour, 7 days a week basis, non-stop in major cities, Manila, Cebu, and Davao. So we'll do projects like they do in Singapore or Hong Kong, non-stop. Because I don't understand why after 5 you stop construction. You don't work on weekends, okay? So we're willing to pay a higher price as long as the projects are done much earlier, because of the congestion cost is significantly too high, 2.4 billion a day. There's a big difference between this president and the previous president. He won't tolerate incompetence.
Okay.
He told the department secretaries, use it, meaning your budget, or lose it, your job. All right? So you'll be answerable for your budget. Okay? So to me, that is the biggest motivation for you to do a great job. Okay?
What would be the top 10 infrastructure priorities in 2017 that businessmen can hold on to, that they can see? Because when the Aquino administration came in, he had 10 public-private partnership flagship projects that didn't fly off quite well. So only one flew off. They had to finish a lot more coming to the end of the term. So for 2017, Secretary, what are those where you're guaranteeing you're going to see this done, this is finished?
The PPP projects will be on top of the amount of money the national government is spending.
Yung 8.3
And
trillion.
to show you how fast this government is, we approved 9 additional PPP projects in 30 minutes.
But how's that?
That's
Was
worth-
it by bidding yon, or was
No,
it
that's
negotiated?
approved by the
Okay,
president, by the NEDA board.
All right, all
so
right.
now what will happen is it will be bidded out.
Okay.
The second difference is that we are now willing to accept unsolicited proposals. Okay, so if there's a decision to have another airport, say in Clark or in Sangli or somewhere else, if you submit a bid, subject to Swiss challenge, it's go.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
So I wouldn't be surprised if we have the next airport being built starting next year.
Are you satisfied with this? Does this encourage you, sir?
What we need is infrastructure. You've traveled, you've seen,
Yes.
Singapore, Hong Kong, even, let's say, other ASEAN countries wherein their infrastructure is there. We were just discussing a while ago that I said, Secretary, is that 5-6% even high? 'cause
China
we-
spends 8 at a
Exactly,
peak 12.
and then we've been spending about 3% before, and now that is a welcome change. And eventually that could even grow higher. As I've said, that will only have positive effects for all sectors. You're going to see residential even going
So,
up.
Richard, you're ready for the traffic. I
Yeah.
mean, if you're talking about 7 days a week of projects, will you be complaining about the insane traffic in Metro Manila?
I think this is what Ben was saying about doing it 24/7.
Yeah.
I came from Hong Kong. I was there for 8 years, and they do their projects at night. They don't stop because the cost of the congestion is actually higher. So that is a very good point.
Yeah.
Same with Singapore. Middle East is the same. They do the roads at night. So if we could implement something like that cuts the construction period shorter, then yes, we do have to bear it during the daytime, but it's a shorter period. Then that's
Okay.
good.
Now, when it comes to taxes, just to continue on this train of thought as well, you have some businessmen who are worried. I mean, the sin tax law was passed during the time of President Aquino, but then now there are proposals from Secretary Sonny Dominguez to include other products in the sin tax law, actually to help revenues, not to generate more revenues. I want to ask you, what about including junk food as sin tax? And then you also have soft drinks, wherein we have a few popular soft drinks companies in the Philippines that employ thousands of Filipinos, already saying that the sin tax for the Philippines won't work because obesity is not the issue in the Philippines, and in fact, it's malnutrition. So I want to ask you about the sin tax law. Where are you there?
It really is a health reform measure, aside from a revenue-generating measure. So there are debates. Yeah, you're correct that for sugary drinks
yeah,
and beverage, they're unhealthy. On the other hand, there are people who use them as meal replacements. So there's really a debate. But soft drinks. So is that really where we want to go? On the other hand, we also want to encourage the more natural drinks like fresh fruits and all of those things. So it's really being studied carefully. In fact, we're consulting right now with health experts in the field of diabetes and the like, because diabetes is now the second highest killer in the Philippines. So that's really a cause for concern. And if we have a healthier Filipino public, then that means lesser health costs. So we'll save on our PhilHealth, medical expenses, and all that. So it's really, prevention rather that we're trying to work on.
When they passed the sin tax law, they knew that it would generate, for example, 65 billion in the first year, next year. The past government literally had a table of how high revenues will go. Do you have that? If you include soft drinks and chips?
We have an estimate for the drinks.
Okay.
For the chips, it's hard because what are chips? Are you going to include crackers?
So for the drinks, before we go to a break, how much would you be able to collect?
Maybe around 50 billion.
Additional?
Yeah.
Really? For all sugary and
but that's
and
over
soft
time.
drinks?
That's over time.
Okay.
But that's over time. So it really depends on what you include, because if you include powder drinks, you have 50 billion. But then because it's on the value added. So if you look at the base, it's about 18 billion for the sugar only.
Okay.
But if you calculate on the value that will be added, that could be, so it's 18 to 50.
All right, we're going to continue our discussion. We look at the country's foreign relations with economic and political giants. ANC presents 2020. The View Ahead will be right back.
We will accelerate infrastructure spending, improving national roads and bridges, and implement...
Many have promised to solve the country's logistics nightmare, including notorious traffic jams that are said to cost the country over 2 billion pesos a day. Will President Duterte finally be the one who delivers? Budget Secretary Ben Diokno envisions the next 6 years to be the golden age of infrastructure, as government ramps up spending to build more roads, rails, and bridges to keep up with economic growth and the increasing demand to move people and goods. The goal for infra spending to hit 7% of GDP within the next 6 years, well above the global average. In the pipeline, over 1 trillion pesos worth of rail projects, including one in Cebu, and the proposed 2,000-kilometer Mindanao Railway project. From fast-tracking the public-private partnership program,
we are going to be faster. The previous government, they were interested in raising revenue from PPP projects, but that's not going to be a consideration in the new government. The consideration is really delivery, rapid delivery of infrastructure.
To implementing a 24/7 work schedule in construction, addressing the daunting gap is a tall order. But it's not just roads that are getting attention. So does the information technology infrastructure. Concrete, steel, and fiber optic cables. Not only is good infrastructure the backbone of a strong economy, it is also an enabler, helping connect islands to spread growth to areas beyond the metro, empowering provinces. The challenge now for Duterte and his men to build good roads and build them fast, lest the promises lead to nowhere.
As the country hosts next year's ASEAN Summit, we take another look at ASEAN integration. What does the Philippines stand to gain or lose in this? Are we going to be an early winner or loser? And how do we strengthen this cooperation with our ASEAN neighbors? We ask these questions amidst a seeming shift in foreign policy, one where the Philippines seems to be moving away from its old Western allies as it turns to new friends, China and Russia. Joining this part of our discussion, we have Senator Gatchalian. He's the head of the Senate Committee on Energy and Foreign Affairs Undersecretary Manuel Teehankee. We also still have with us on this segment Budget Secretary Ben Diokno. You've said this is going to be the golden age of infrastructure, while President Duterte really wants to focus on hitting the bigger audience. He wants to focus on inclusive growth. We now live in a global economy. And Senator Sherwin, do you feel that President Duterte's pronouncements, many times pronouncements that he takes back after some correction was made or some impact has already happened, do you feel it will affect our economic outlook in the long run?
I think, of course, credibility will be affected. I think the most recent, although this is not connected to economics, but the most recent is the naming of several suspected narco-politicians. And definitely that will affect the credibility of the government. And
if you were wrong.
If the government is wrong, no? But I think what is important here is accountability and make sure that those people who supplied information, those people who crunch the numbers should be accountable to that because the president relies on those information.
Okay. Ambassador, the United States is the third largest investor in the Philippines, Japan being the first. I mean, the president has clearly, even if he says he's not anti-West, he's taken a lot of pot shots, very strong comments against the U.S. What is the long-term effect of this when it comes to business?
Well, the Constitution is aspirational. In the academe, there have been much discussion which presidents have been more independent or not independent. But the basic importance of an independent foreign policy is the welfare of the people. The president, as already pointed out by Secretary Diokno, is most concerned with inclusive growth, lifting us from the very bad record we have of having the poverty level in the Philippines. So to have inclusive growth, one has to take foreign policy as a supplemental tool in terms of attracting investment. And so regionally, the Philippines' primary focus, as mentioned in your intro, is the ASEAN partnership. Straight from FBR's time, ASEAN is the anchor foreign policy of the Philippines, being regional. And then we have our concentric partners with the ASEAN dialogue partners and our traditional Western allies, as you put it.
Now, clearly, we have a president that wants to focus on being closer to its neighbors. I mean, we've been called by foreigners as not knowing China as well as we know the U.S. You know, they're talking about we are close to a neighbor that's technically thousands of miles away when we don't even know our very own neighbor. The president already visited Indonesia. He'll be visiting China soon. Does this mean more business for the Philippines in the long run?
This part of the world is the fastest growing region, ASEAN and China, India. No? So that even if we just look to our neighbors, there will be tremendous economic activity opportunities for us. Okay, to me, our biggest asset will be our people. Okay, so if you free up the use of services, that will be a big boost for the Philippines. Okay?
But isn't President Duterte alienating American businessmen in the country? I mean, there are American businesses here Do you feel these pronouncements alienate them? And, you know, in a way,
As I always tell foreign investors, don't get sidetracked by this noise. Don't look at the trees, look at the forest, okay? And I can assure you, maybe for the next 10 years, this will be, I will use the term again, golden age.
golden age.
Golden
Okay.
age, so
Yeah.
This will be our golden age.
All right. Now, why doesn't the president talk about the economy so much? People ask. I mean, he has 3 press conferences a
Right.
day.
Let me answer
Okay,
that.
then you can answer. And somebody had said, you know, he talks about drugs every single time he speaks.
I've served 3 presidents.
Okay,
President
yeah.
Aquino, President Estrada, President Duterte. To me, an important trait of a good president is one who knows how to delegate authority, recognize his limitation. He's not an economist. In fact, he loves to call himself local politicians. He wants us to call him mayor, not president. So he chooses people in their areas of specialization, and he lets us do our thing. Right? The economic team is performing well, I think, without much
Okay.
intervention.
As to why the president is focused on drugs and criminality. As already mentioned, it is a precondition to his achievement of overall inclusive growth. It actually is an underlayer of the 10-point socio-economic agenda. Without cleaning up, originally 6 months, and I think the mayor president, if we can call him mayor president, wants to finish this peace and order issue, which will unleash the socio-economic agenda. Let me just point out that in ASEAN, he's the only one who spoke so strongly against transnational crime, which involves drugs. We are parties to so many international conventions on human rights, but we are also party to so many conventions against transnational crime, human trafficking, and drugs. So ASEAN embraced and welcomed with President Widodo of Indonesia the problem because they have 4 million underperforming citizens and we have 3.7. As Secretary Diokno pointed out, our number 1 asset are our people. And if we have 3.7 individuals underperforming due to drugs, that's a wasted asset.
Which would mean statistically we have more. Because Indonesia has 250 million in population. We're 104 million, right? We have a question from the audience right now.
Hi, my name is James Keating from Service Source International. The president is pushing to shift to a federalism form of government. Will that complicate the campaign to improve the ease of doing business?
Look at the U.S. U.S. is a federal system of government, okay? And so the states will be responsible for a lot of responsibilities from here on now under a federal system of government. So he has in mind a strong president with a federal system of government. But I quite frankly, I'm not too worried about what's going to happen 3-4 years from now. I'm just focused on the budget. Because there will be a lot of discussion on what kind of federal system we're going to adopt. Is the best. Because number 1, the question there is, what expenditure responsibilities are you going to delegate to the state? Okay? And then what will follow then is how much revenue are you going to go to the states, give to the states on the basis of the expenditure responsibilities. And the third one is, given that some states will be poor, others rich, then there's got to be an intergovernmental system. So there will be a lot of issues to be resolved before we get to where we want to be. But in the meantime, there are immediate problems I have to pay attention to.
Coming November, they will be voting for the next U.S. president. And Hillary Clinton just said, I mean, in the debate, words matter. You know, words matter. It's the basic criticism against Donald Trump. Do words matter?
I think we're watching this event closely, and I think personally, I think both personalities have good and bad points for the country. I think for stability and for the continuity of programs and relationship, I think Senator Clinton or Secretary Clinton would be the best for the country. And I think a lot of...
What would happen to the Philippines If Donald Trump wins.
I don't want to speculate on that.
But what would happen, Ambassador, if Donald Trump wins?
It's not my. It's not our.
Just-
I don't
Really?
know.
Just to, I
Yeah.
I'm
promise
the
to,
diplomat, right?
I promise to answer the question, but just to go back to the federalism issue.
Okay.
Because
Quick,
that
yeah.
is really a pillar program and mandate that the president got. So actually, it will increase competitiveness among the region states.
Okay.
So, and the foreign investor will have the choice. If, as we all know, because of Mayor President's policies in Davao, there is investment in his region. So if there is a particular region state that is underperforming in terms of ease of doing business, then it's competitive. You move to the neighboring region or some more competitive state. It has a payback to that region because they will then be benchmarked and they must improve their record.
So you like that more?
Yeah, because there is a unleashing of competition. Secondly, you must be careful also what you hear in the press about investors, because we just had the networking evening with all the foreign chambers, including the American Chamber of Commerce. They are all very excited about the ease of doing business reform and, more importantly, the promised constitutional change, easing the foreign investment restrictions. And this is where I think an independent foreign policy supplements, because this is only supplemental to the golden age of infrastructure. Foreign investment will supplement our own budgets in needed infrastructure. So we must remember PPP is a supplement. It does not displace government's own responsibilities to spend.
Yeah, sure.
Can
Go
I
ahead.
add to that, Karen? Actually, there are more fundamental problems that foreign investors are looking at. For example, stability in the energy sector. And right now we have enough energy, but that's not enough for the next 10 years. And with our present process right now, just to build a hydropower plant, just to go through the process alone, you need about 4 years to complete the permitting section alone. You need about 220 signatures to build the hydro plant.
Kala nga namin, 164.
No, that's hydro. That's
hydro.
hydro.
Okay.
But we're abundant with hydro potential. We have so many rivers, we have so many places we can put hydro. And hydro right now supplies about 20% of our energy. It can go up as high as 30%. But because of this constraint, foreign investors cannot, or even potential investors cannot come in and put up hydro plants on time. And that's already affecting our supply. And when energy is affected, then it creates instability in the business environment.
And are we seeing that President Duterte wants to act on this right away? Because one thing about this president, I mean, for all the criticism on what he says, he seems to be a guy with political will. At the very least, he wants things done quickly.
Yes, we're a very impatient bunch.
Okay.
And I think it's basically
Which is
because
good.
we're very old. Look at the cabinet. We want things done as soon as possible.
We're very old. Yeah. Okay, Ambassador, before we go to a break, is there anything you want to add?
No, I
Words
think-
matter, not as much?
Well, words matter, but I think the substance, the devil is in the details. So I think the president is very clear about what he wants to achieve. And he's very strict, as Secretary Diokno said, on competence and performance. So I think the first 100 days with his promised program yielded 600,000 drug surrenderies. So that's already 600 out of the 3.7 undergoing rehab. So we still have around 2 million to go.
All right. Up next, representatives from the private sector join our discussion. What's on their wish list? ANC presents 2020. The View Ahead will be right back. Welcome back. You're still watching ANC Presents 2020, The View Ahead. We now want to hear from the business community. What do they think about the reforms and policy changes of the Duterte administration? Joining our panel, Roberto Ansaldo. He's from the Management Association of the Philippines. He's also former Agriculture Undersecretary. We also have Bonnie Tan, President of PCCI Davao Chapter. and Marcelo Co, President of the Anvil Business Club. Thank you for joining us, gentlemen. And of course, still with us is Senator Sherwin Gatchalian and Foreign Affairs Undersecretary Manuel Teehankee. To the three members of the business community that just you've joined us, are you satisfied so far, or have you seen any genuine reforms that this administration is trying to make to improve the business climate? Roberto.
Definitely yes. Coming from Mindanao, where I live now, this is our chance at the spotlight. As is often known, when you have somebody assuming power, they help their provinces. Hopefully, the progress that has long been delayed for Mindanao will finally come and translate into real inclusive growth for the poor.
What about you, Bonnie? What's your wish list?
Actually, I've been doing business in Davao since way back 1973, so until now. So we feel a lot of changes during the term of President Duterte when he was a mayor. So if there might be changes now, I think part of it will be Davao will be a model for some of the changes, especially in the
What do you
business.
like most about doing business in Davao?
When we started doing business in Davao, when mayor was still not the mayor of Davao, peace and order was really not so good. There was NPA during daytime. They snatched the short arm of the policeman and they killed the policeman during daytime. Up
In
to the
broad
extent,
daylight.
yeah, that's why at that time, policeman patrolling the street at daytime will be in pairs, because if you are alone, you got shot and your arms will be taken away. Then when mayor becomes the mayor of Davao, that problem was bit solved. Then here comes another thing, the NPAs. Then after that, the Baon Gang from Manila, the remnants. That was an organized kidnap for ransom. And normally, if somebody is kidnapped, they will report it with the mayor. And to develop the trust, especially of the business group, composed mostly of Chinese businessmen, every time there is an operation against a victim, Mayor Duterte goes with a group of policemen. Not because he is the one who will be shooting the kidnappers, but this is to show a moral support to businessmen that this police enforcer will not connive with the kidnap group.
But if he shot the kidnappers, would it have bothered you?
No, because actually it's only on talks, but normally the policemen say they really do the operation. And with that, most of the kidnapped victim now is cooperating with the government, reporting such crime, that up to the extent that it was really stabilized. So when peace and order is stabilized, businessmen will expand their businesses. And there was a time that when you say, we were asking, then what? After the crime was solved, then what? What are the economic plans of the mayor? We businessmen were asking him. He said, no, it's not my business doing business. It's my business for you to have peace in mind and do your business and expand. That's
so
it.
style na pala niya yun noon pa.
Yeah, that was the style.
Oo.
Because he said, I don't know how to do business, but I know how to protect you and your business establishment. So it goes like that. And the result really was quite good.
What's your wish list?
Our wish list, in the perspective of businessmen, ordinary businessmen, is consistency of policies.
Okay.
Businessmen are pragmatic people. They want firm decision making, and they see that in the president. It's like running a company. If you're a CEO, you have to have clear vision, and that's what he did before during his campaign. It was very clear, it was very specific. Your vision has to be specific. Like, for example, they've already just recently awarded the
Common
connector,
station.
the connector, aside from the common station. The connector between the south and the north tollway, which has taken years. I mean, just to clear the obstacles in finishing the papers and the procedures. So now it has the businessmen see some light finally, and like Secretary Diokno was saying a while ago, that it's the length of time. You sacrifice now in a shorter period of time, but you get to benefit the harvest, see the benefits in a short period of time.
It's good that we have two businessmen from Mindanao. And I've been going back to Mindanao many, many times. And Mindanao really is the land of promise. There's so much potential in Mindanao, even for energy, hydro, solar, even oil and gas in Liguasan Marsh. But the problem really is the peace situation in the ARMM area and also the insurgency problem. And I really appreciate the President focusing on this. In fact, he always mentioned his Moro roots. And this really comes into play, because by association and by understanding the root causes of the problems there, we might achieve peace and order in Mindanao and investment will flow in. If you go to ARMM, land is unlimited and you can put up anything you want there. And sayang lang because we're not maximizing those land. And that's really the blessing of Mindanao.
But other than that, clearly, let's say the victory of President Duterte rescuing the Norwegian hostage, 2 Filipino hostages, I think, who were Globe contractors, I'm correct. And I'm not sure but if there were a few others, but I know he's working on 12 to 15 more. I mean, this is no small feat. I mean, clearly he's showing that I want to solve the insurgency problem with the Abu Sayyaf. This, what businessmen fear, that they'll be kidnapped. So how do you feel about that? How he's been acting with the Abu Sayyaf problem?
I believe the long-term solution to peace and order is for the local people to be able to feel they have a stake in the future of this country. Okay. The little brown brother that the ambassador had mentioned. The Filipino today, I have an expression, isip alipin tayo, hindi tayo isip may-ari.
Ay, galing yan, isip alipin tayo. Pati isip empleyado tayo, hindi isip negosyante. Totoo yun.
Yes. We don't feel owner of our own country.
Yeah.
So a lot of the Abu Sayyaf, for example, the rebellion, is because they don't feel they're owners of their future, the 2020, the view ahead.
Yeah.
And what's got to happen now is I'd like to be able to point out the excellent point that the senator had mentioned. There's unlimited land. The fact of the matter is every square meter of that land has an owner or a resident. There is no such thing as idle land like in Malaysia. Every square meter is occupied. Now, those people, if you want to include them in inclusive business, partner them with commercial companies that will buy their product, they need something in the budget that has not even been mentioned. I'd like to bring that up now, Karen. It's very easy to talk about hard items in the budget like roads, airports, etc. Yes. I would like to be able to have in the budget put long-term financing for those landowners who have been granted lands by the National Commission for Indigenous People, Agrarian Reform, DNR, Agroforestry Management Agreement. All of that land is covered by 1 or 2 ownership documents. As a matter of fact, they're overlapping already now. That's a big problem. I'd like to be able to identify low-lying fruit, free areas, and extend long-term financing similar to what Malaysia did. Malaysia today has a 0 poverty index. They're growing palm oil, rubber, cacao, coffee, but I'd like to have the owner of the land is the cultivator of the crop. Unless they have capital, you will never reach that status. That's what they need to have to feel owner and therefore contribute to the peace and order in the Mindanao area.
All right, we have 2 questions from the audience.
Ryan Gallego. With regards to the earlier discussion on tax reform program, at the end of the day, the tax cut or breaks that we will gain from lower income taxes or corporate income taxes, that might be offset by the planned increase in sin taxes, as we discussed earlier, and even VAT. So could you comment on that?
Well, I think, just for a clarification, I think VAT will not be increasing. Not yet. I mean,
no,
there
not
was
VAT.
Yeah,
actually,
not VAT.
The way I look at it,
Yeah.
and from the initial literature that I've seen, it's just shifting the burden from one entity to the other entity and making the entity with the capacity carry the burden. One of the proposals I heard was to increase taxes to the millionaires or the richer, affluent section of our society. So we were just shifting the burden in that case. Again,
dapat naman.
Dapat naman rin.
Dapat
And
naman.
of course, the snack food and the unhealthy is also consumed by mostly the affluent. So you're just shifting there.
Another question.
Paul Chung of Personiv. My question is that what kind of relationship do you see between the U.S. and the Philippines, given our unpredictable president? and his recent remarks about the U.S. And with the upcoming leadership shift this coming November, where does China fit in all this?
The president, as a lawyer, has already been very clear. The Constitution mandates him to pursue an independent foreign policy. He's already said he's not anti-West, not anti-US, but he's pro-Philippines. And the Constitution is very clear. So when you're pro-Philippines, you're pro-poor. Your target is to limit the 24 million poor and uplift them. And so we need alliance partners, economic partners. So there is an equation. So we will have a good relation with the US because I think that's unbreakable. The tie with the US is unbreakable. But of course, they still owe us an apology for the Phil-Am war. And with Japan, we've made progress because we got an official apology. I think an apology in this area will bring our relationship to new heights. The return of the bells from Samar will bring also the US-Philippine relation to new heights.
So,
at the same time, we must progress with the constitutional mandate of amity with all nations. We are not supposed to pursue a policy of hostility to any nation. So I think the president is very clear. He said, Mr. United States, we're still your friends, but please, we will also have to pursue relationships with Russia, China, and our neighbors.
But I just want to get, I caught you on something there. Are you going to advise President Duterte is he seeking a formal apology from the United States for the Phil-Am war? I mean, it took Japan so long to recognize the comfort women. I mean, you're talking about many, many years, and I don't think it was even a direct apology.
No, but Japan is only like 60 years ago.
Okay, so
the bells of from Samar later, and the massacre in Holo are older.
Does the president's pronouncements against the U.S. Bother any of you or any of your businessmen friends?
I don't have a reaction to that one, but I would like to comment on two earlier points. Karen.
Okay.
Maybe at the right time, maybe others.
All right. Would you want to comment on this? Okay, go ahead. You wanted to comment on...
Yes, on 2 points. First of all, on that fear factor.
Okay.
Because I spent time in Davao, etc. I think the fear that started the whole improved atmosphere, if you will, is the fear that hindi na ako makakalusot ngayon. That the law will be implemented. And we need that kind of righteous fear.
Okay, I agree with that.
Okay, if you listen to the people now in Davao, try to get a taxi driver to go past 30 kilometers an hour. You'll say, sir, we don't do that in our city.
Okay.
They have gained ownership over the peace and order. That's what you want.
That's one.
Number one. The second is about the taxes. I'm not going to touch on that, but I will touch on the penalties. We are collecting from the banks 9 billion in penalties every year for not lending enough to agriculture. I would like to see that go into a fund that is going to take care of the long-term funding that will fund smallholders and enable them to partner, develop plantations in partnerships with commercial companies. I would like to see that happen.
Okay. As a closing statement, I mean, clearly we have an unorthodox president, as many would say he's an acquired taste if he were food. You know, he's quite surprising to many. But then with a 91% trust rating, the highest of all the presidents that have come and gone in Philippine politics, clearly the Filipino people see a connection when it comes to this president. They believe him. He is trusted. So the view ahead, given that these are his numbers, and look, President Duterte is 71 years old. I mean, he's a take it or leave it kind of guy. It seems like it. So what's the view ahead for you?
First of all, he's very specific,
Okay.
very clear cut. So, for example, like the real estate thing, they the economic team is planning to reduce the donor's tax,
Okay.
which is a very big plus because there are many owners of land, but they're very illiquid. So this can spur up the economic growth in real estate further.
Okay, so you like him specific.
Yes.
Okay, that's one. Bonnie?
It was mentioned about the federal system of government. Actually, the Bangsa Moro is asking for privileges and rights similar to a federal state. That's why the president told them, hey guys, don't fire your gun, let's talk. Give me time. What you are asking is similar to federal state. We cannot give you a federal state in Mindanao for Muslims only. If you want, we will study it. Then we will make federal state maybe for the whole of Mindanao if we cannot make it the whole of the Philippines. Because this is the only way to solve the problem, not of the two Muslim groups. Because you must consider we have some Christian group in Mindanao. The Christian group might ask, what you have given to the Muslim, can we not have it? That form of government. So I believe this peace talk will be very successful, coupled with the form of government that is being studied by him.
All right. I like that. Very interesting. The view ahead, Roberto.
What I find very, very interesting here is I think this president personifies the owner of the Philippines. He thinks owner of his country. He is not subservient. I would just like to quote, if I may, take a couple of seconds. Personal experience. When Cory was president and the rebels were trying to take over and they were dropping bombs from L5s into EDSA, remember that? I remember that I heard this comment from a neighbor of mine. And he says, why don't we stop all this nonsense and just call in the jets of the Americans from Clark to make a pass-by and scare everybody away. And I looked at him, and this guy is an educated, affluent person, and he wants the U.S. to take care of our problem. That to me doesn't sit well. And Duterte, I think, personifies that, and he says, let's take charge of our own country and move forward. And I think we'll make a lot more progress once we begin to think isip may-ari rather than isip alipin.
Very good point. So that's a mind shift right there. Ambassador, the view ahead.
Change is coming, change is happening, and
Change is here.
And change is here.
Let's face it.
And change will have happened by 2019. I'm just looking 3 years ahead. So maybe the drug war will have been won. Then you have the Federalism initiative already underway.
Okay.
And then you also have the foreign policy and economic policy being in tandem for the benefit of the Filipino people, and the economic objective being inclusive growth, cutting the poverty level from 24 million presently to hopefully at least cut by 30%.
The biggest victory of President Duterte, and one of those that you've said, is that he's really going to deliver on his promise on inclusive growth. I think that's one. Senator, last words, the view
for
ahead.
me, Karen, there's a good 18-month window for this administration. And in that 18-month, the administration should maximize its political capital. We've seen his numbers, 91% approval rating. And all the reforms should happen within that 18 months. The tax reform, peace and order, anti-drug, all of that should happen. And I think the president is being very strategic in terms of approaching all of these problems. And here we are in the Senate, we're also ready for those reforms. And I think as formed by the majority, and we're ready to support all of those reforms in order to really address the root causes of the problem of the country, which is poverty and also inequality.
All right, thank you very much to all of our guests. The stakes are high. The Duterte administration comes with very high expectations. And you have an economy that's among the brightest in Asia. Now more than ever, we realize nation building is not just the government's job. It is everybody's business. I'm Karen Davilla. This has been ANC Presents 2020, The View Ahead, in partnership with Colliers International, the leading commercial real estate services provider. Thank you for watching, everyone.